Chapter 7 of The Fastest Boy in the World. I didn't listen to the next bit of the conversation. Grandfather was asking about what had happened to the bullet during all those years and how he died and everything. I needed the time to get my head around what I'd just heard. All my life, Grandfather had been there, living with us in our house, helping around the farm a bit, but spending most of his time sitting on a stump of wood outside the door, looking out across the countryside. He would walk into Cadamy once a week or so, and stay for a few hours talking to the other old men. He'd pick up bits and bobs of news that way, but nobody ever came to visit him. Cadamy is a small place, and everyone knows everyone else's business. Grandfather must have kept quiet about his old adventures, because if even one person had known it, it would have been all over the town, and I'd have heard about it too. I was trying to imagine what Grandfather might have been like when he was young. Did he look like me? He must have been an amazing sight in his bodyguard uniform. He must have been incredibly strong and brave, too, to survive the labour camp, and then jump out of the truck straight onto that horse and find his way home. I wasn't surprised by how he went for that guard, because I knew he had a temper. He loses it at home over little things all the time. He'd beaten me too, often, when he thought I was being cheeky. The thing that had surprised me the most was that he'd had a friend, a best friend, a man he was ready to die for. I'd never have thought that Grandfather would have had feelings like that. What was that? What did you say? My head jerked up. I'd stopped listening, but Grandfather sounded so sharp that he brought me back to the present. My nephew Wandoo came here, with that wife of his, to see you? Yes, Atu Almu was nodding. I thought it was a little strange. There was something about him. As a matter of fact, he told me that you had died last year. Grandfather snorted. That boy, he's a tricky one. I've always known it. Too much like his devious father. I could never trust him, and he was my own brother. Well, he's dead now, and I hope that God will rest his soul. But I, as you can see, am very much alive. What did Wandoo mean by saying I was dead? What did he want from you? Well, said Atu Almu slowly, I suppose it was my fault for saying too much. I'd known Wandoo slightly for years. We were students at the business school at the same time, and then a few weeks ago, at some party or other, he happened to tell me that his family had come from around Cadamy. My father had told me that you came from that part of the country, so I asked him if he knew you. Old Demissy, he said. Yes, he's my uncle. I told him that I really wanted to find you, because you'd been my father's best friend, and before he died, my father had given me something to give to you, something valuable that had belonged to the Arrow all those years ago. I told him that my father had kept it for you and wanted to return it to you. Grandfather nodded with satisfaction, as if he'd been hoping for something and his wish had been fulfilled. Later on, at the end of the party, Atu Almu went on, I met Wandoo and his wife by the door as they were leaving. She looked up at me with a pretty smile and said, Wandoo's told me something exciting. You've got a family treasure to give to his uncle. There was something too eager about her. She was trying to be charming, but she didn't fool me. She was a sharp one, I could tell. Runs rings around poor Wandoo. Sentimental value only, I told her, but if Wandoo can find out how to reach his uncle, I'll send it on to him. Someone else was coming up behind us, trying to get through the door, so we all split up and went out into the street. This was all getting too deep for me. I was struggling to hang on to a thread. What was this mysterious thing that Atu Almu was talking about? Was it a kind of treasure? Money? A hoard of gold? My ideas were getting bigger and bigger. Were we going to be rich? I'd often wondered if he did it. Grandfather was smiling broadly. He promised that he'd try if anything happened to me. But how did he manage to dig it up out of the place where I'd buried it, smuggle it out of the prison camp, and hang on to it for all those years? He must have known how dangerous it would have been if they'd found it on him. He did, Almu said, but he said he owed it to you. He knew how precious it was, and you'd saved his life. Oh, please, what is it? What are you talking about? I was unable to keep quiet any longer, but I might as well have saved my breath, because they both ignored me anyway. Grandfather's face had gone dark with anger. So Wandoo and Meseret came to see you, he said. I think I know why. They wanted to get my father's heirloom off you. I suppose my brother had told him about it. He was always resentful that our father had given it to me. It was only last week when they came, Ato Almew said. Wandoo told me that his uncle Demissy had passed away, and if I would give him whatever it was, he'd make sure it went on to your son, his cousin. I thought at the time that there was something a little bit odd about him. He didn't seem happy at all. His wife of his, Mrs. Meseret, kept butting in and finishing his sentences for him. But you didn't give him anything, did you? I think I broke in. I'm sorry, but you didn't give him anything, did you? I broke in. You didn't trust him. This time, they both turned to look at me. I think they'd forgotten I was there. You're a sharp one, Solomon, Ato Almew said with a laugh. No, I didn't give it to him. I decided that as soon as I had some free time, I'd make the journey down to Kidamy and visit the Arrows family myself. Grandfather seemed to have forgotten about Cousin Wandoo. He was shaking his head wonderingly. So the bullock kept it for me, after all. He hinted at it in his letter without saying exactly what it was he had to give to me. I suppose he realised that he didn't have long to go and wanted to get it to me before he died. What a man. There'll never be another one like him. Ato Almew stood up and walked round behind his desk. I've got it here, he said. I'll give it to you now.